He's a good guy, and we have a great understanding of each other. We're great friends. Now, he's a very complex, involved person. I never get tired of him.
The passing of Carl Dean, who was married to Dolly Parton, occurred when he was 82 years old. In spite of this, his passing is not the only thing that has everyone talking. The unexpected tributes that came pouring in from celebrities that you would never expect, as well as the deeply personal tribute that Dolly herself gave, were what shocked the world even more than anything else. Not even her closest friends were able to find the words to express how raw and emotional the tribute was. Please remain with me, because the information that we are about to disclose will forever alter the way that you perceive Dolly Parton and her love relationship. One of the most mysterious marriages in the history of Hollywood was established and maintained by Dolly Parton and her husband, Carl Dean, for a number of decades. While Dolly was shining brightly under the spotlights of fame, Carl Dean favored a more sedate lifestyle, one that was free from the presence of cameras and red carpets. In the stories that Dolly told, fans were only able to catch glimpses of him. The stories that she told about him portrayed him as her rock, her anchor, and her greatest love. Today, however, Carl Dean has passed away at the age of 82, leaving behind not only his wife, but also a legacy that is filled with secrets, devotion, and a love story that defied the odds. The video that we are about to show you will take you inside the private farewell that Dolly gave to her husband. Even those who were closest to her were taken aback by the tribute. In addition to this, we will reveal the unexpected flood of celebrity tributes that came in from stars that you would never expect. And we will also uncover the hidden side of Carl Dean's life that the public never saw. Keep up with the story, because it is not only about the loss of a loved one. A side of Dolly Parton that you have never seen before is revealed in this film, which is about love and legacy. Throughout the majority of Dolly Parton's career, Carl Dean was like a shadow that was always present but was never visible to the naked eye. In spite of the fact that they had been married for more than half a century, Carl's refusal to be in the public eye became something of a legend. Fans could only speculate about the man who had won the affection of one of the most famous entertainers in the world, because paparazzi were unable to capture him, interviewers were unable to entice him, and fans were unable to know anything about him. Unfortunately, on the morning of February 29, 2025, that peaceful life came to an end in a way that was both gentle and heartbreaking. Carl Dean reportedly passed away in a calm and peaceful manner at home, in the very Nashville house where he and Dolly had settled down and built their life together, according to sources close to the family. There were no scenes from the hospital, no media circus, just the silence of a man who had lived his life according to his own terms and who passed away in the same manner. In his final moments, Carl maintained his privacy. After his passing, Dolly did not issue a statement to the public in the hours immediately following his passing. Friends who were close to the couple disclosed that Dolly, who had always been known for her humor and warmth, gravitated inward and became more introverted. An insider who has been a friend of the family for more than 4 decades described the atmosphere in their home as being peaceful and almost sacred. It was as if you were entering a place where love had been a part of their lives for decades and was now learning to live without him. However, this is the part that everyone was taken aback by. Both a publicist and a manager were not responsible for making arrangements for Carl's funeral care. All of the planning for them was done by Dolly herself, right down to the tiniest individual details. Not for the purpose of putting on a show, but rather as a final private gift from a wife to her husband. Each and every flower, song, and tribute was selected by the wife herself. There were no cameras present, and there were no press releases issued. Rather, it was a private farewell that was attended by Carl's family, friends for life, and a few other individuals who had earned his limited trust. Because Carl Dean wanted it to be private, personal, and away from the scrutiny of public curiosity, this is how it was intended to be. On the other hand, nobody anticipated the flood of celebrity tributes that would soon come pouring in, which demonstrated how far Carl's influence had spread despite his lack of public recognition. In a world where celebrity funerals are frequently turned into media spectacles, Dolly Parton made a decision that was not only a perfect reflection of her own heart, but also of the intensely personal love story that she shared with Carl Dean. The fact that this tribute was a window into a side of Dolly that the world had rarely seen, vulnerable, unguarded, and stripped of the rhinestones and rehearsed charm, is what makes it so unforgettable. It is not just the beauty of the tribute that makes it so memorable. According to those who were closest to the family, Dolly spent the days following Carl's passing immersed in planning his tribute. She did this not as a global superstar, but rather as a grieving wife saying goodbye to the man who had been her silent partner through every high and low. The memorial service was held not in a large hall or a venue that was packed with celebrities, but rather in the small white chapel that was tucked away on their Nashville property. This chapel was a place where Carl frequently went to take some time for quiet prayer and solitude. The chapel had a straightforward and uncomplicated design. The aisle is lined with framed photographs that span the entirety of Carl and Dolly's 58-year marriage, as well as wildflowers that Carl used to individually select for Dolly from their property. There were some photographs that had never been seen before, and they were taken from albums that Carl had hidden away in the drawer of his bedside table. The photo ops that were staged and the glossy media handouts were not present. The sincerity of this was unadulterated, deeply personal, and heartbreaking. However, it was Dolly's tribute speech that rendered everyone in attendance incapable of uttering a single word. Dolly had spent decades cultivating her public persona by relying on humor, grace, and a sense of invincibility during that time. In that very instant, however, all of that armor was stripped away. Dolly addressed Carl in a direct manner, her voice shaking as she did so, and her hands clenching a letter that she had written to herself. Not the entire crowd, not even the cameras, but just him. First, she expressed her gratitude to him for loving the woman who was hiding behind the wigs and sequins, for familiarity with the genuine Dolly. When no one was looking, the person who sang to him in the kitchen was the one who did it, who, after a long tour, would curl up next to him on the porch swing and watch the world go by. Despite all of her fame, she was the one who occasionally had doubts about herself. Despite the fact that her voice was shaking with emotion, she continued, "You knew me before the world did. In addition, you loved me in the same way." After that, Dolly read passages from many of Carl's love letters that he had written to her over the years. Never before had anyone, not even her closest friends, been aware of the existence of these letters. Some were insignificant scribbles that were written on the receipts, while others were torn pages from notebooks. Other letters were longer and more heartfelt communications that Carl had left for her to discover when she returned home from her trip. The attendees were able to catch a glimpse of the tender and poetic side of Carl Dean through those words. Even among Dolly's most devoted followers, there was a side that had been concealed. On the other hand, this is the part that totally blew everyone away. By singing, Dolly brought her tribute to a close. It wasn't one of her songs that topped the charts, but rather a song that she had written specifically for Carl many years ago. A song that was never published, and it was never discussed with anyone outside of their marriage. She performed the lyrics, which captured a lifetime of love, heartbreak, and devotion, with nothing more than her trembling voice and an acoustic guitar. The only sound that could be heard was Dolly's voice reverberating through the wooden rafters as the chapel fell into complete silence. It was by the time she reached the final verse that tears began to stream down her face, as well as the faces of nearly everyone else. In contrast to what people were accustomed to seeing, this performer was not polished. This was Dolly Parton, the woman, the widow, the wife, exposing her heart in the only way that she was able to do so. Even people who had known the couple for decades admitted that they had never fully understood the extent of their connection until that particular moment brought it to their attention. Despite the fact that Carl remained hidden from the public eye, Dolly's heart was always filled with the sense that he was the leading man. Additionally, despite the fact that the funeral was small and private, the impact of her tribute was felt far beyond the confines of the chapel. As a result of the fact that the subsequent segment of this narrative took an unexpected turn, a number of the most prominent figures in the entertainment industry began to come forward and share their own personal stories about Carl Dean, the kind of tales that would take even Dolly herself by surprise. Over the course of many years, Carl Dean remained a specter in the glittering world of Dolly Parton, a face that was almost never seen by fans but a name that they were familiar with. The majority of people came to the conclusion that Carl did not have any genuine connections to the entertainment industry. Instead, he chose to live in the background while Dolly took the spotlight. On the other hand, after he passed away, an extraordinary thing occurred. An onslaught of tributes from some of the most prominent figures in the fields of music, television, and film started to pour in continuously. Even those individuals who considered themselves to be die-hard Dolly fans were taken aback by what they disclosed. The legendary figures of country music came first. Carl had driven Loretta and Dolly to their very first joint performance in the 1960s, long before either of them had bodyguards, personal assistants, or luxury tour buses. This information was revealed in a heartfelt statement that was released by the family of Loretta Lynn. There was more to Carl than just being Dolly's husband back then. When the honky-tonks became rowdy, he was the man who made sure both women made it home safely. He was her quiet protector. Following that, tributes were paid by contemporary musicians who acknowledged that Carl had served as a kind of unofficial mentor, providing guidance not on music, but on how to endure fame without losing one's identity. Kenny Chesney, who had developed a close relationship with Dolly over the course of their time together, related that Carl had once mentioned to him that if you want to maintain your soul, you should keep in mind that what occurs when the cameras are turned off is more important than what occurs when they are turned on. Kenny admitted that those words had remained in his mind throughout the entirety of his professional life. However, this is the point at which the narrative takes an unexpected turn. It wasn't just members of the country music scene who came forward. Some of the most famous people in Hollywood, such as Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin, have shared their own personal stories about Carl's quiet wisdom. Jane recalled a dinner party that took place at Dolly's house in Tennessee while the movie 9 to 5 was being filmed. As the women sipped wine and laughed in the living room, Carl quietly grilled steaks on the back porch. Eventually, he sat down with Jane and shared a piece of advice that was straightforward but profound. It was about life, marriage, and maintaining a sense of reality in a field that thrives on illusion. As Jane recalled, he had told her, "Do not believe the hype, whether it is positive or negative. It is all noise. The true stuff is what you find when you first open your eyes in the morning." I have never forgotten that. There were even music legends from other genres of music who paid tribute to country music. According to Paul McCartney, Carl once went to a private industry dinner with Dolly in the early 1980s. During the course of the conversation, the two men ended up discussing a wide range of topics, ranging from farming to fame. One of the most genuine men I have ever encountered, Carl was completely unimpressed by celebrity, but he had a profound interest in music, according to Paul's description of him. Who is the person who divulged a story that had been kept secret for many years? At the beginning of the 1990s, Reba was unable to find any solace in her grief following the tragic plane crash that claimed the lives of members of her band. The fact that Carl Dean, a man she had only met briefly, was the one who quietly called her was something that very few people knew about. He did not call her with grand words, but rather with an offer to sit with her discreetly whenever she required company. "There are times when you don't require answers," he told me. "At times, all you require is for someone to simply sit next to you and remain silent until you are ready," she recalled, her voice cracking with the intensity of her feelings. That was Carl, the man who no one perceived but who was felt by everyone. Carl Dean was not only known as Dolly Parton's elusive husband, but also as a man whose quiet wisdom and gentle heart had quietly shaped the lives of some of the most powerful figures in the entertainment industry. As the stories continued to come in, a clearer picture of Carl Dean began to emerge. However, here is the shocking part. Along with these tributes came whispers of secrets that Carl had carried with him to the grave. These whispers included stories about times when Carl had to step in to protect Dolly from the darker side of fame, times when he walked away from fortune to preserve his own peace, and even hints at private struggles that the couple faced, struggles that they kept hidden from the world. As the tributes continued, it became abundantly clear that Carl Dean was not merely a mystery. Rather, he was a legend in his own right, a man whose influence extended far beyond the confines of their Nashville home. In addition, just as everyone was beginning to believe that they had a complete understanding of the situation, a final tribute emerged, which would forever alter the way that fans viewed Carl Dean. After the entire world had reached the point where they believed they had heard everything there was to know about Carl Dean, one last tribute emerged, and it came from a source that nobody anticipated. The source of this information was not a country music icon, a Hollywood celebrity, or even a member of Dolly Parton's inner circle. The source of the information was a man who had remained anonymous for several decades, a man whose relationship with Carl Dean had been purposefully concealed from the general public up until this point. A retired music executive from Nashville named Walter Harris, who had quietly left the industry in the late 1980s under mysterious circumstances, was the one who paid tribute to the deceased. It was only to those who were deeply rooted in the history of country music that his name rang a faint bell, but to the average fan, he was a ghost. However, as Walter's touching tribute to Carl Dean spread throughout the world, it became abundantly clear that his narrative would reshape the way in which the world world understood the marriage between Dolly and Carl, as well as the sacrifices that Carl made in order to safeguard it. Walter acknowledged, in his own words, that he owed Carl Dean his life, as well as his freedom. In a rare interview that was conducted with a local publication in Tennessee, Walter described how, in the 1970s, Carl had rescued him from a potentially hazardous situation that involved the seedier side of the music industry. During that time period, Walter had been employed as a talent scout, and he had, without his knowledge, become involved with influential individuals who were connected to organized crime. There were some people who saw the flourishing country music scene as a potential source of money laundering. In certain circles, Carl Dean had quietly developed a reputation, not as a tough guy or an enforcer, but as someone who understood how to diffuse volatile situations with nothing more than calm words and an unshakable sense of decency. This was despite the fact that Carl Dean was known to the general public as a simple man who ran his asphalt business. Carl was not the type of person who started fights, but he was the type of person who could put an end to them with a silent authority. The statements made by Walter indicate that Carl had personally intervened after Walter had signed contracts with potentially harmful individuals without his knowledge. He did not do it for the purpose of gaining fame, money, or recognition. It was because Walter had been Dolly's friend since the beginning of her life, and Carl believed that protecting Dolly's friends was an extension of protecting Dolly herself. This is why he got involved. It wasn't just that. As a result of Walter's tribute, it became clear that Carl's covert protection of Dolly went well beyond the occasional intervention. There were times when Carl personally made certain that certain predatory figures in the music industry were kept a safe distance away from his wife. Young female artists were frequently exploited by powerful men, producers, agents, and executives during the 1970s and 1980s, when country music was experiencing a surge in popularity. These individuals saw their youth and aspirations as an opportunity to exploit them. Despite the fact that Carl Dean disliked being famous and receiving attention from the public, he would show up when it mattered the most. He would make his presence known at certain industry parties in a low-key manner, without any fanfare, not as Dolly Parton's husband, but rather as a man who made it abundantly clear that Dolly was not to be touched, manipulated, or coerced in any way through his actions. As a matter of fact, his mere presence was frequently sufficient to halt potential predators in their tracks. But here's where things get interesting. A personal cost was incurred by Carl as a result of his role as Dolly's silent guardian, as Walter's tribute made clear. Although Carl's protective nature was seen as a threat by powerful men in the industry, Carl continued to be protective. There were men who, out of fear that Dolly's husband would be present, worked in the background to keep her from participating in certain opportunities and deals. Dolly's most lucrative deals, including potential crossover projects in Hollywood, were subtly sabotaged by men who wanted her to play by their rules rather than her own. These men wanted Dolly to have to play by their rules. He was aware of this. In spite of this, Walter claims that Carl never once felt regret for the sacrifices of his life. The words of Walter indicate that Carl was aware of the fact that being married to a celebrity meant that there were times when you had to be the shadow behind the light. However, Carl was by no means merely a shadow. In essence, he was the steel framework that supported the entire house. The revelation that Walter made at the end of his tribute left the audience in a state of shock. Over the course of several decades, Carl Dean had maintained a private journal in which he documented every transaction that he had shielded Dolly from, every threat that he had subtly neutralized, and every instance in which his presence alone had altered the trajectory of her professional life. According to Walter, this journal was not a means of exacting revenge or acting as a form of blackmail. Not only was it a love letter, but it was also a record of everything that Carl had done in order to safeguard the woman he loved. Carl Dean's journal, kept secret until after his passing, revealed the depths of his quiet sacrifices for Dolly Parton. While she knew he was protective, she never realized the extent of his behind-the-scenes efforts, late-night calls, personal confrontations, and declined deals, all to shield her from harm. As the days passed after Carl's funeral, more details of his private life emerged, painting him not just as a devoted husband, but as a silent guardian. His journal chronicled unseen battles and sacrifices, proving he was far more than the man who stayed out of the spotlight. He was the foundation of Dolly's freedom to shine. In interviews, Dolly honored Carl's unwavering love, reflecting on the simple joys they shared: quiet porch nights, laughter, and a steadfast presence that never wavered. Then came one final revelation, a secret message Carl had recorded for Dolly, played at his memorial. "I never needed the world to know. You were always my shining star. If I could do it all again, I'd choose the same quiet life beside you. No cameras, no crowds, just us, as it was meant to be. I'll be waiting on the porch, my sweetheart. Take your time." Tears filled the room. Their love story wasn't about fame, but a devotion so strong it needed no audience. As Dolly stood by Carl's casket, saying her last goodbye, his love remained eternal, quiet, and profound. In order to receive additional exclusive stories, tributes, and glimpses behind the scenes into the lives of the celebrities you admire, make sure to give this video a like and subscribe to our channel. As you think back on the legendary love story of Dolly and Carl, what is your favorite memory? In the comments section below, please share your thoughts. It would be wonderful if you could get in touch with us. It is important to keep in mind that behind every icon lies a story that the world only rarely hears, and it is our mission to bring these stories to actuality.